unlimited drama series.
The waiter placed the check on our table with that practiced smile that screamed, "Please tip well, I have student loans." $237 for dinner. $237 to watch my wife flirt with her boss while pretending I didn't exist. "Oh, this is Eli," Vivian had said when we arrived, gesturing at me like I was an afterthought. "He's just here. Just here." 22 months of marriage, and I was just here. My name is Elliot Harlow, but everyone calls me Eli. I'm 38 years old, and I work as a senior inspector for the Portland City Licensing Commission. It sounds boring as hell, and most people think it is. What they don't realize is that I hold the keys to every business in this city. Want to open a restaurant? You need my approval. Planning a tech startup? Better hope I'm in a good mood when I review your application. But sitting in that overpriced restaurant on Congress Street, watching my wife's hand brush against Andrew Fraser's arm for the third time in 10 minutes, I felt powerless as a kid with his lunch money stolen. "The salmon was incredible," Monica gushed, dabbing her lips with a cloth napkin. Monica Chen was Vivian's best friend and the HR director at Fraser Tech Solutions. She had the kind of laugh that could shatter glass and the discretion of a town crier. "Drew knows all the best places," Vivian said, her voice taking on that breathy quality I used to think was reserved for me. "He's so cultured." Drew, not Andrew, not Mr. Fraser. Drew. Andrew Fraser was everything I wasn't. 44 years old, silver at his temples, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my car payment. He owned Fraser Tech Solutions, the hottest startup in Portland, specializing in some kind of data analytics that made companies millions. Vivian worked as their PR director, a job she'd landed 6 months ago and wouldn't shut up about. "Eli works for the city," Vivian continued, and I caught the slight edge in her voice. "Licensing and permits. Very stable work. Stable. The kiss of death in a world that worshipped disruption and innovation." "That's nice," Andrew said, not bothering to look at me. He was scrolling through his phone with the kind of urgency that suggested the fate of civilization hung in the balance. I excused myself to the bathroom, needing air more than anything else. The restaurant's patio overlooked the city, and I stood there watching the lights twinkle below. 20 years I'd lived in this city. 20 years of knowing every street, every business owner, every politician who mattered. That's when I heard Andrew's phone ring. "Fraser here," he answered, stepping onto the patio behind me. He hadn't noticed me in the shadows. "What do you mean there's a problem with the licensing?" His voice went tight. "We filed everything months ago." I turned slightly, watching his reflection in the glass door. "Harlow? Elliot Harlow?" Andrew's face went white. He's who?" "Oh my God." He spun around, scanning the patio until his eyes found me. For a moment, we stared at each other. I could practically see the wheels turning in his head as he realized exactly who I was. "I'll call you back," he whispered into the phone. I smiled and walked back inside, leaving him standing there like a man who'd just seen his own ghost. The rest of dinner passed in a blur of forced conversation and nervous glances from Andrew. Vivian seemed oblivious, chattering about some marketing campaign while Monica nodded along like a bobblehead. But I could feel the shift in the air, the way Andrew kept stealing looks at me when he thought I wasn't watching. When we got home to our house on Deering Street, Vivian disappeared into the bathroom for her nightly routine. I could hear her humming in the shower, a song she used to hum for me during our early days together. Now it felt like a knife between my ribs. I was putting away her purse when I felt it, a second phone hidden in the inside pocket. Not her usual iPhone, but a cheap Android burner. My hands were shaking as I powered it on. No password, rookie mistake. The message thread was right there on the home screen. Vivian and someone listed as D. Drew, obviously. 3 months of messages. 3 months of planning secret meetups, sharing inside jokes, and mocking the boring husband who paid for everything. "He has no idea," one message read. Poor Eli. So focused on his little permits and licenses. If he only knew what real power looked like. "Your husband is such a Boy Scout," Drew had replied. "Does he still tuck you in at night and read you bedtime stories?" LOL. More like falls asleep watching the news. I need a real man, not a bureaucrat. I set the phone down carefully, my hands steady now. The shower was still running. Vivian was still humming. I opened my laptop and did what I do best: research. 20 minutes later, I had everything I needed to know about Fraser Tech Solutions: their licensing status, their permits, their business registration, their tax filings, every piece of paper they'd ever filed with the city, and every violation they were currently committing. When Vivian came out of the bathroom, I was reading in bed like nothing had happened. "How was dinner?" I asked, not looking up from my book. "Fine," she said, climbing into bed beside me. "Andrew's really brilliant. The company's going to be huge." "I'm sure it is," I replied. She was asleep within minutes, but I lay there staring at the ceiling until dawn. By morning, I had a plan. The Portland City Licensing Commission occupied a gray stone building on Exchange Street that looked like it had been designed by someone who hated joy. Most people saw it as a bureaucratic obstacle, a place where dreams went to die in triplicate. I saw it as my kingdom. "Morning, Eli," called Benny Rodriguez from his desk near the window. Benny was my field agent, a former professional wrestler who'd found his calling in municipal enforcement. At 6'4" and 280 pounds, he made business owners very cooperative during inspections. "Morning, Benny. How's the Fraser Tech file looking?" He pulled up the records on his computer. Clean as a whistle, officially. They filed for their business license 8 months ago, got approval 6 months back. Current on all fees and filings. "Officially," I repeated. "What about unofficially?" Benny's grin could have powered the building. "Well, that's a different story. Want me to take a drive by their offices?" "Just a routine inspection. Make sure everything's up to code." Fraser Tech Solutions operated out of a converted warehouse in the Arts District, all exposed brick and industrial chic. The kind of place that screamed, "We're disruptors" to anyone under 30, and "we're pretentious" to everyone else. I spent the morning reviewing their files with the kind of attention usually reserved for archaeological digs. Every business has violations if you look hard enough. Parking requirements, fire codes, occupancy limits, signage regulations. The city code was 800 pages of potential gotcha moments. At lunch, I drove to Rosie's Tavern on Forest Avenue, a dive bar that looked like it hadn't been updated since the Carter administration. The regulars treated it like their personal intelligence network, and Ruth Kowalski was their unofficial chief of operations. Ruth was 73 years old, 5 feet tall, and knew more about Portland's business community than the Chamber of Commerce. She'd been serving drinks and collecting gossip for 47 years. "Eli," she called out as I walked in. "The usual?" "Just coffee today, Ruth. I'm working." She poured me a cup of coffee that could have stripped paint and leaned across the bar. "Heard your wife's working for that hotshot tech guy, Fraser something." "Fraser Tech Solutions," I confirmed. "You know anything about them?" Ruth's eyes lit up. Information was her currency, and she was rich as Croesus. "No, plenty. That Fraser character comes in here sometimes, always on his phone, always talking loud enough for everyone to hear. Real piece of work. Treats the staff like servants." "What about his business?" "Growing fast, from what I hear. But there's talk." She lowered her voice conspiratorially. "Monica Chen from their HR department comes in here with her girlfriend sometimes. Had a few too many last week and started talking about how Fraser's been mentoring some of his female employees, if you know what I mean." My coffee suddenly tasted like acid. "She mention anyone specific?" Didn't need to. The way she kept looking at her phone and giggling about Vivian's secret project told me everything I needed to know. I left Ruth a $20 tip and drove back to the office with my jaw clenched tight enough to crack teeth. Benny was waiting for me with a thick folder and a shit-eating grin. "How'd the inspection go?" I asked. "Like Christmas morning. They're violating at least 12 different codes. Blocked fire exits, improper electrical work, exceeding occupancy limits, unpermitted construction in the basement. And that's just what I could see without a warrant." Enough for a shutdown. Enough for a shutdown, fines, and a very public hearing with the city council. I picked up my phone and dialed the number I'd memorized that morning. Fraser Tech Solutions. This is Andrew Fraser. Mr. Fraser, this is Elliot Harlow from the Portland City Licensing Commission. We need to schedule a formal inspection of your facility. Silence on the other end. Then, when? Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. sharp. I suggest you have your attorney present. Is there a problem with our licensing? That remains to be determined. Have a good day, Mr. Fraser. I hung up and leaned back in my chair. Through my office window, I could see the city sprawling out below me. My city. My rules. That evening, Vivian came home 3 hours late with a story about a client emergency that required her immediate attention. She was glowing with the kind of energy that comes from doing something thrilling and forbidden. How was work? She asked, barely looking up from her phone. Productive. We're doing some major inspections tomorrow. Big tech company that might be cutting corners. Her fingers paused over her phone screen for just a moment. Which company? Can't say. Confidential city business. She nodded and went back to her phone, but I caught the slight tremor in her hands. Later that night, after she'd gone to bed, I checked the burner phone again. 17 new messages between her and Drew, increasingly frantic as the evening wore on. He knows something, Drew had written. My contact at City Hall says Harlow is planning something big. Eli doesn't know anything, Vivian replied. He's too focused on his little bureaucrat games to notice what's happening right under his nose. You better be right. If this goes south, we're both screwed. Trust me. I know my husband. He's completely clueless. I set the phone down and smiled in the darkness. Clueless. We'd see about that. The Fraser Tech offices buzzed with nervous energy when Benny and I arrived at 9 a.m. sharp. Andrew Fraser met us at the door, flanked by a lawyer who looked like he charged by the minute. Gentlemen, Andrew said, his voice steady, but his eyes darting between us like a cornered animal. I believe there's been some misunderstanding. No misunderstanding, I replied, pulling out my clipboard. Routine inspection. I'm sure everything's in order. For the next 2 hours, Benny and I went through that building like archaeologists, uncovering a lost civilization. Every violation we'd spotted the day before, plus a few new ones. The basement had been converted into additional office space without permits. The fire suppression system was disconnected. The electrical panel looked like it had been installed by someone who'd learned wiring from YouTube videos. This is harassment, Andrew's lawyer protested as I photographed the blocked emergency exit. This is public safety, I replied. Unless you'd prefer to explain to the fire marshal why your employees can't evacuate in an emergency. Vivian appeared in the doorway, her face pale. She'd been watching from across the room, pretending to work while monitoring our every move. Eli, she said, her voice small. What are you doing here? My job, I said without looking up from my notes. Mrs. Harlow, you might want to update your resume. This company's going to be shut down pending code compliance. The color drained from Andrew's face. You can't do this. Actually, I can. Section 14.3 of the Municipal Code gives me broad authority to suspend business operations when public safety is at risk. I handed him a thick folder. You have 72 hours to address these violations or face permanent closure. Andrew's lawyer was already on his phone, probably calling every city councilman he knew. It wouldn't matter. The violations were real, documented, and legally bulletproof. As we packed up our equipment, I caught Vivian staring at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not love, not even recognition. Fear. That afternoon, Monica Chen called in sick. By evening, the local business journal had picked up the story. Rising tech star faces shut down over safety violations. The article mentioned that Fraser Tech had been one of Portland's fastest-growing companies, with major clients and expansion plans now in jeopardy. Vivian came home at midnight, her eyes red from crying. You did this on purpose, she said, standing in our living room like an avenging angel. I did my job. Bullshit. You targeted Andrew's company because you're jealous. I looked up from my book. Jealous of what? She opened her mouth, then closed it. She couldn't exactly say she was cheating without admitting she was cheating. He's successful, she said finally. He's going places. Not anymore. You bastard. You absolute bastard. Do you have any idea what you've done? I've enforced the municipal code. If Mr. Fraser had followed the law, there wouldn't be a problem. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her trying to figure out how much I knew. The smart play would have been to come clean, to apologize, and beg forgiveness. Instead, she doubled down. I want a divorce, she said. Okay. The single word hit her like a slap. She'd expected me to fight, to beg, to promise I'd back off if she stayed. Okay, she repeated. I'll call my lawyer in the morning. You should probably find somewhere else to stay tonight. This is my house, too.
2,000. I didn't get any jewelry.
I was ending
With a
it.
diamond goodbye gift?
Watch more on Grammarly.com.
Actually, it's not. I bought it 6 months before we got married. Check the deed. For the first time since I'd known her, Vivian was speechless. She packed a bag and left without another word. I poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon and sat on the porch, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You think you're so smart. You have no idea what you've started. I deleted the message and poured another drink. The next morning brought a parade of phone calls. Andrew Fraser had been busy, reaching out to every mutual acquaintance we had, spinning his version of events. According to him, I was an unstable bureaucrat who'd targeted his company out of jealousy over his professional relationship with my wife. The first call came from Dave Patterson, who'd been my college roommate and was now a successful attorney downtown. Eli, what the hell's going on? Dave's voice crackled through the phone. Andrew Fraser called me last night, says you're abusing your position to harass his company. Did he mention the blocked fire exits? The unpermitted construction? The electrical work that's one short circuit away from burning down the building? He says those are minor issues that you're blowing out of proportion. Dave, I've got photographs, documentation. If there was a fire in that building, people would die. Silence on the other end, then. Look, maybe you should recuse yourself from this case. Let someone else handle it. Why would I do that? Because it looks bad, Eli. Your wife works there, you're going through marital problems, and now you're shutting down her company? It looks like revenge. It looks like doing my job. Does it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're having a breakdown. I hung up on him. The second call came from Janet Murphy, Vivian's sister, who lived in South Portland with her investment banker husband. Eli, Vivian called me crying last night. She says you've lost your mind. Did she tell you why she was crying? She says you're trying to destroy her career because you're having a midlife crisis. Janet, your sister is having an affair. That's ridiculous. Vivian would never. I have proof. What kind of proof? I almost told her about the burner phone, the messages, the hotel receipts I'd found when I'd really started digging. Instead, I said, the kind that will hold up in divorce court. You're being paranoid. Vivian loves you. Vivian loves what I provide. There's a difference. Janet hung up on me, too. By noon, I'd lost 3 friends and gained a reputation as an unhinged bureaucrat with a vendetta. The story was spreading through Portland's professional community like wildfire, and Andrew Fraser was the innocent victim of my jealous rage. That's when Benny knocked on my office door. Boss, we've got a problem. Just one? City Council's calling for a review of the Fraser Tech inspection. Councilman Bradley wants to meet with you this afternoon. Tom Bradley was a glad-handing politician who'd never met a developer he didn't like. He also happened to be Andrew Fraser's golf partner. Let me guess. He thinks I overstepped my authority. He thinks you should take a leave of absence while they investigate your conduct. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. 20 years of exemplary service. And now they wanted to throw me under the bus because I'd done my job too well. Set up the meeting, I said. And Benny, start documenting everything. Every conversation, every phone call, every email. If they want to play politics, we're going to play by the rules. The meeting with Councilman Bradley went exactly as I'd expected. He sat behind his mahogany desk like a judge pronouncing sentence, his face grave with manufactured concern. Eli, I've known you for 15 years. You're a good man, but this situation with Fraser Tech has people worried. Worried about what? Public safety violations? Worried about your objectivity. Your wife works there. Your marriage is in trouble. And now you're shutting down the company. It doesn't look good. Tom, I've got photographs of blocked fire exits. I've got documentation of electrical work that violates 6 different safety codes. I've got evidence of unpermitted construction in a basement that's being used as office space. None of that has anything to do with my marriage. Maybe not, but the appearance matters. I'm recommending you take a voluntary leave of absence until we can sort this out. And if I refuse, then it won't be voluntary. I stood up and straightened my tie. I'll clean out my desk. Eli, you're making a mistake. Andrew Fraser is a respected businessman. He's bringing jobs and investment to Portland. You're destroying that over a personal grudge. I'm enforcing the law. If that's controversial, maybe you should find a new line of work. I walked out of his office and straight into the lobby, where Andrew Fraser was waiting with his lawyer and a smug smile. Mr. Harlow, Andrew said, extending his hand, I hope there are no hard feelings. I looked at his hand, then at his face. Go to hell. His smile widened. I'll be sure to take good care of Vivian while you're between jobs. That's when I hit him. The punch landed square on Andrew Fraser's jaw, sending him stumbling backward into a marble pillar. His lawyer started shouting about assault charges, while Andrew held his face, blood trickling from his split lip. You're finished, Harlow, Andrew snarled. I'll have you arrested. Get in line, I replied, shaking the sting out of my knuckles. Security guards appeared from nowhere, but I was already walking toward the exit. Behind me, I could hear Andrew screaming about pressing charges and ruining my life. Let him try. I had bigger plans. The next 24 hours were a blur of phone calls, legal consultations, and strategic planning. My lawyer, Rhea Morrison, was a pit bull in a Chanel suit who specialized in employment law and destroying people who underestimated her. They suspended you without cause, she said, reviewing the paperwork in her downtown office. The Fraser Tech inspection was legitimate, properly documented, and legally bulletproof. The only reason they're coming after you is political pressure. Can we fight it? We can do better than fight it. We can destroy them. Her smile was sharp enough to cut glass. But first, tell me about your wife. I laid out everything. The affair, the burner phone, the messages, the hotel receipts, I'd tracked down through credit card statements. Rhea took notes with the focused intensity of a surgeon planning a complex operation. How long do you want this divorce to take? She asked. As long as possible. I want her to suffer. Spoken like a man after my own heart. I'll file the papers today and make sure they're served at her office, in front of her coworkers, during the lunch rush. While Rhea prepared for legal warfare, I focused on the real battle. Andrew Fraser thought he'd won by getting me suspended, but he'd made a crucial mistake. He'd assumed I was just another bureaucrat who'd fold under pressure. He was about to learn how wrong he was. I spent the afternoon at Rosie's Tavern, nursing a beer and listening to Ruth's intelligence network. Word was already spreading about the city council meeting, the suspension, and the punch heard round City Hall. Fraser's been bragging all over town, Ruth said, polishing glasses with practiced efficiency. Says he made you look like a fool. What else is he saying? That you're a jealous husband who couldn't handle his wife working for a successful man. That you abused your position to harass his company. That you're probably mentally unstable. I nodded and took another sip of beer. Anyone believe him? Some do. But others remember what Fraser was like before he got successful. Arrogant little prick who thought the rules didn't apply to him. What about Vivian? Ruth's expression darkened. She was in here last night with Monica Chen and some other girls from the company, celebrating like she'd won the lottery, talking about how she was finally free from her boring husband and ready to start her real life. The beer turned bitter in my mouth. She mentioned anything specific? Said she and Fraser were planning to take the company national? Maybe move to California or New York. Leave all the small-town thinking behind. I finished my beer and left Ruth another generous tip. Outside, the October air was crisp with the promise of winter. Portland looked different somehow, like I was seeing it through new eyes. My phone buzzed with a text from Benny. Boss, you need to see this. We met at a coffee shop in the Old Port, away from prying eyes and curious ears. Benny slid a manila folder across the table. Remember how I said Fraser Tech was clean officially? Well, I did some digging into their financial records, public filings, tax documents, business registrations. I opened the folder and started reading. After 5 minutes, I looked up at Benny with new respect. How did you find this? I got a buddy who works for the State Revenue Department. Fraser Tech has been claiming tax credits for research and development, but they're not actually doing any research. They're just reselling software packages from other companies and calling it innovation. That's fraud. Gets better. They've been inflating their employee count to qualify for small business loans, then laying people off after the money comes through. And that basement construction we found? They've been renting it out to other companies without declaring the income. I flipped through page after page of documentation. Tax evasion, fraud, money laundering. Andrew Fraser wasn't just cutting corners. He was running a criminal enterprise disguised as a tech startup. Benny, you beautiful bastard. This is enough to shut them down permanently. There's more? Your wife's been signing off on a lot of these documents as PR director. If the feds get involved, she's looking at conspiracy charges. I closed the folder and leaned back in my chair. Vivian thought she was trading up from a boring bureaucrat to a successful entrepreneur. Instead, she'd hitched her wagon to a criminal who was about to crash and burn spectacularly. What do you want to do with this? Benny asked. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I was looking for. I'm calling my friend at the FBI. Special Agent Sarah Collins had been my contact at the FBI for 3 years, ever since a licensing investigation had uncovered a money laundering operation in the Arts District. She was thorough, relentless, and had a personal hatred of white-collar criminals who thought they were too smart to get caught. Eli, she said, answering on the second ring, I heard you were having some employment difficulties. Nothing I can't handle. But I've got something that might interest you. We met that evening at a seafood restaurant on Commercial Street. Sarah was in her early 40s, with graying hair and the kind of intense focus that made criminals confess just to stop her staring at them. This is impressive work, she said, reviewing Benny's research. How long has this been going on? At least 2 years, maybe longer. Fraser's been using the tech startup angle to hide what's essentially a shell game with government money. And your wife is involved? Up to her neck. She's been signing documents, managing communications, probably helping cover up the fraud. If you move on this, she goes down with him. Sarah looked at me over her coffee cup. You know that once I open this investigation, there's no going back. If she's charged, she's looking at federal prison time. I know. This isn't just divorce court anymore, Eli. This is serious. I thought about Vivian celebrating at Rosie's Tavern, laughing about her boring husband while planning her escape to California with her criminal boyfriend. I thought about the messages on her burner phone, the mockery, the casual cruelty of someone who thought she was untouchable. How long do you need? I asked. Give me a week to build the case. Can you keep Fraser from running? Leave that to me. The next morning, Ria's process server walked into Fraser Tech Solutions with divorce papers and a smile that could have melted steel. According to Benny's sources, Vivian was in the middle of a client presentation when the server announced her name loud enough for the entire office to hear. Vivian Harlow? You've been served. The papers detailed everything. The affair, the hotel receipts, the burner phone messages, the financial infidelity. But the real kicker was the property settlement. Since I'd bought our house before we were married, and Vivian had contributed nothing to the down payment or mortgage, she was entitled to exactly nothing. Her car? Leased in my name. Her credit cards? Joint accounts that I was freezing. Her savings account. What savings account? By noon, word was spreading through Portland's professional community that Vivian Harlow had been publicly served with divorce papers that painted her as a cheating gold digger. Her reputation was in ruins. Andrew Fraser tried to play damage control, issuing a statement about supporting his employees through personal difficulties. But the story was already out there, spreading through social media and professional networks like a virus. That afternoon, I got a call from Dave Patterson. Eli, I owe you an apology. For what? I did some checking on Andrew Fraser. Turns out he's not as clean as he pretends to be. There are rumors about his business practices, his treatment of employees, his personal conduct. What kind of rumors? The kind that make me glad I never took him on as a client. I'm sorry I doubted you. One down, several dozen to go. The next call came from Janet Murphy. Eli, Vivian's been calling me all day, crying about the divorce papers. She says you're trying to destroy her life. I'm trying to end our marriage. There's a difference. She says the affair allegations are lies. Then she can prove it in court. She says she loves you. She has a funny way of showing it. Janet was quiet for a moment. Then, the hotel receipts in the divorce filing, are they real? Every one of them. Jesus, Eli, I'm so sorry. 2 down. Bye.